Ever notice how some of the most powerful people in history were completely alone? No friends cheering them on. No support system catching them when they fell. No one believing in them except themselves. So what did they know that you don't? I am about to tell you something that is going to flip everything you've been taught about loneliness completely upside down. The reason you feel weak when you are alone isn't because loneliness is actually weakness. It is because society has programmed you to believe you need other people to be complete, and that programming is keeping you powerless. You spend your Friday nights scrolling through social media, watching everyone else live their lives. You accept invitations from people who drain you because being with bad company feels better than being alone. You stay in relationships that destroy you because the alternative terrifies you. You know what you are really doing. You are running from the one thing that could actually set you free. But here is what is going to shock you. The most powerful people who ever lived didn't just tolerate loneliness. They weaponized it. They understood a dark truth about human psychology that most people spend their entire lives running from. A truth that separates those who merely survive from those who dominate. What if I told you that your loneliness isn't a curse but a gift waiting to be unwrapped? That every hour you spend alone is an hour you could be building something unstoppable? That the emptiness you feel is actually a void waiting to be filled with pure, undiluted power? This isn't comfort for the lonely. This is a battle plan for turning your isolation into domination. By the end of this video, you'll understand why history's greatest conquerors, thinkers, and leaders all shared one thing in common. They mastered the art of being alone. Why the crowd fears solitude while the powerful seek it. And most importantly, how to transform the loneliness that has been crushing you into the fuel that makes you unstoppable. Are you ready to stop fearing the silence and start using it? Drop this affirmation in the comments. Solitude is my superpower. Number 1. The lie you've been sold about loneliness. Let's start by destroying everything you think you know about being alone. From the moment you could understand words, society has been drilling one message into your skull. You need other people to be happy. You need friends to be fulfilled. You need a partner to be complete. And if you are alone, something is wrong with you. This is the biggest lie ever sold to humanity. And it wasn't an accident. Think about it. A person who can be happy alone is dangerous. They can't be controlled through social pressure. They can't be manipulated through fear of exclusion. They can't be kept in line by threatening to take away their relationships. Society needs you afraid of loneliness, because a person who isn't afraid of being alone is a person who can't be controlled. But here is what they don't want you to know. The fear of loneliness is completely manufactured. Humans survived for hundreds of thousands of years in small tribes where being alone was dangerous. Your brain still carries that ancient programming. It screams at you that isolation equals death. But you are not on the savannah anymore. You are not going to be eaten by a lion if you spend a weekend by yourself. The fear you feel when you are alone is a biological ghost, a leftover from an era that no longer exists. And the people who understand this have a massive advantage over everyone still running from shadows. Machiavelli once said, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves." The trap here is the manufactured fear of loneliness. And once you see it for what it is, it loses all power over you. Look at the people who actually run the world. The CEOs, the strategists, the visionaries. They don't spend their time seeking constant companionship. They spend hours alone, thinking, planning, building, while everyone else is numbing their loneliness with shallow social interactions. These people are sharpening their minds in solitude. The crowd fears being alone. The powerful know it is where all real power is forged. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I reject the lie. Number 2. The hidden power of isolation. Now that you understand the fear of loneliness is a trap, let's talk about what happens when you stop running from it. What happens when you actually embrace being alone? Something remarkable occurs. Something that terrifies the people who need you to stay dependent on them. When you are alone, there is no one to perform for, no audience to impress, no social mask to maintain. For the first time, you can actually hear your own thoughts without them being drowned out by what everyone else thinks you should be thinking. This is where self-knowledge is born, and self-knowledge is the foundation of all real power. Think about every major decision you've ever made. How many of them were truly yours? How many were influenced by what your friends thought, what your family expected, what society approved of? When you are constantly surrounded by others, their opinions seep into your mind like water through cracks. You start thinking their thoughts, wanting their wants, living their life instead of your own. Isolation is the only cure for this mental contamination. But there is something even more powerful that happens in solitude. Your mind begins to work at a level it never could in company. The greatest ideas in human history came not from brainstorming sessions or group projects. They came from individuals sitting alone with their thoughts. Newton under his apple tree, Einstein imagining riding a beam of light, Darwin walking alone through the fields. Solitude is where genius is born. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, meant only for himself, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He ruled the entire Roman Empire, yet he understood that true power came from within, from the hours he spent alone in reflection, not from the crowds that surrounded him constantly. Here is what isolation actually gives you: clarity of thought without outside noise, time to develop skills without distraction, space to know yourself without performance, freedom to pursue goals without others pulling you off course, energy that isn't being drained by social obligations. Every hour you spend alone is an investment in yourself. Every hour you spend seeking company to avoid discomfort is a withdrawal from your potential. Drop this affirmation in the comments. Isolation is my advantage. Number 3. Why the crowd will always try to pull you back. Here is something that is going to make you see your relationships differently. The people around you have a vested interest in keeping you afraid of being alone. Not because they're evil, but because your independence threatens their comfort. When you start spending time alone and becoming comfortable with it, something shifts. You become less available, less predictable, less easy to control. And the people who were used to having access to you whenever they wanted start to panic. They'll tell you you are being antisocial. They'll say they're worried about you. They'll guilt you for not being around more. But what they're really saying is that your independence makes them uncomfortable. Because if you can be happy alone, it means they're no longer essential to you. And that terrifies them. They need you to need them. Because as long as you need them, they have power over you. This is why mediocre friends will always try to fill your schedule with meaningless hangouts. This is why toxic relationships fight hardest when you start pulling away. Machiavelli understood this dynamic 500 years ago. He wrote, "Men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that he who deceives will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived." The deception here is that you need constant social connection to be whole. And the people benefiting from this deception will fight to keep you believing it. Watch what happens when you start saying no to social obligations that drain you. When you stop responding to every text immediately. When you start guarding your alone time like the precious resource it is. Some people will adapt and respect your boundaries. These are the ones worth keeping. Others will throw tantrums, guilt trips, and ultimatums. These are the ones proving exactly why you needed boundaries in the first place. The crowd will always try to pull you back because your freedom reminds them of their own chains. They've made peace with their fear of loneliness. Watching you conquer that fear forces them to confront their own weakness. And most people would rather drag you down than face that mirror. Robert Greene wrote, "The best way to increase respect is to make your presence felt with intermittent absence. Your absence is powerful. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose myself. Number 4. Building an empire of one. Now let's get practical. How do you actually transform loneliness from a prison into a power plant? It starts with completely reframing what you do with your time alone. Most people use solitude to escape themselves. Television, social media, video games, anything to avoid sitting with their own thoughts. This is not solitude. This is distraction dressed as aloneness. Real solitude is intentional. It is not about being physically alone while mentally somewhere else. It is about being completely present with yourself. And what you do in that presence determines whether loneliness weakens or strengthens you. Here is the framework for turning every hour of solitude into power. First, use solitude for skill acquisition. The hours you spend alone are hours you could be getting better at something. Learning a language, mastering an instrument, building a business, developing expertise that will separate you from the crowd. While others are wasting their solitude numbing themselves with entertainment, you are building capabilities that will compound over years. Second, use solitude for strategic thinking. When you are constantly reacting to social demands, you never have time to think strategically about your life. Where are you going? What do you really want? What is actually important to you? These questions require silence to answer. Honestly, use your alone time to become the architect of your future instead of just reacting to whatever happens next. Third, use solitude for physical transformation. Your body is the vehicle for everything else you want to accomplish. Time alone is time you could be training, improving your health, building the physical presence that commands respect before you even open your mouth. No one is judging your form. No one is watching your struggle. Just you, doing the work that most people are too distracted to commit to. Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Your solitude must have a purpose. Random isolation without intention just breeds depression. But focused solitude with clear goals builds empires. The difference between a monk and a hermit is that the monk has a practice. Your alone time needs a practice too. Fourth, use solitude for emotional regulation. When you are constantly surrounded by others, you outsource your emotional stability to them. You need them to make you feel okay. But when you learn to sit with yourself through difficult emotions without running to others for comfort, you develop an inner stability that becomes unshakable. This is the foundation of true mental strength. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I build my empire alone. Number 5. The Machiavellian approach to relationships. Here is where it gets interesting. Learning to be powerful alone doesn't mean you never interact with others. It means you interact from a position of strength instead of desperation. And this changes everything about how people treat you. When you don't need people, you can finally choose them properly. Think about every bad relationship you've ever been in, every toxic friend you kept around too long, every person who treated you poorly while you kept coming back. What did they all have in common? You needed them more than they needed you. That imbalance gave them permission to treat you badly. But when you can be perfectly happy alone, you stop accepting crumbs from people's tables. You stop tolerating disrespect, because any company is better than no company. You start selecting relationships based on what they add to your life, not what void they fill. This selectivity transforms you from someone who accepts any relationship to someone whose attention is valuable. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." In relationships, this translates to respect over approval, when you can walk away from any relationship at any time because you don't need it. People treat you differently. They know they can't take you for granted. They know disrespect has consequences. They know your presence in their life is a choice, not a dependency. This doesn't mean being cold or cruel. It means being selective and strong. The best relationships in your life will come when you no longer need them, because you'll be choosing partners, friends, and associates based on genuine value alignment rather than fear of being alone. You'll attract people who are drawn to your strength rather than predators who sense your neediness. Here is the paradox. The less you need people, the more they want to be around you. Neediness repels, self-sufficiency attracts. When you become someone who is complete alone, you become irresistible to others. Not because you are performing confidence, but because you genuinely have it. And that authenticity is magnetic. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose. I don't need. Number 6. The dark night of the soul and what waits on the other side. Let's be honest about something. The path from fearing loneliness to mastering it isn't comfortable. There will be nights when the silence feels crushing, moments when you question everything, times when going back to your old patterns of desperately seeking company feels like the only option. This is what some traditions call the dark night of the soul. The period when you've left your old ways behind, but haven't yet fully become who you are meant to be. It is uncomfortable because you are in transition. You are no longer the person who needed constant validation from others, but you haven't yet fully embodied the power of self-sufficiency. Most people quit here. The discomfort of being alone during this phase sends them running back to shallow friendships, toxic relationships, and meaningless social obligations. They'd rather have the comfort of their chains than endure the temporary pain of breaking free. But here is what they don't understand. The discomfort is the transformation. You can't become strong without feeling weak. First, you can't become complete alone without first feeling empty. Sunday Tzu wrote, "In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity." The chaos of loneliness during your transition is not something to escape. It is something to mine for gold. Every difficult night alone is building something in you that comfortable people will never develop. Every moment of sitting with your discomfort instead of running from it is strengthening a muscle most people don't even know exists. And what waits on the other side of this dark night? Freedom, real, unshakable freedom. The freedom of knowing you can be dropped anywhere in the world with nothing and no one and still be okay. The freedom of never being emotionally hostage to anyone because you don't need them to feel complete. The freedom of choosing every relationship in your life instead of clinging to whatever scraps are available. This freedom changes everything. Your decisions become clearer because fear of loneliness no longer clouds your judgment. Your boundaries become stronger because you are not afraid to enforce them and be alone. Your purpose becomes more focused because you are not wasting energy on social performances. This is what is waiting for you. If you can endure the dark night, drop this affirmation in the comments. I embrace the struggle. Number 7. The daily practice of the powerful solitary. Transformation doesn't happen through one moment of insight. It happens through daily practice. So let me give you the exact framework that will turn your loneliness into power, day by day, hour by hour. First, sacred morning hours. The first hour of your day belongs to you alone. No phone, no social media, no checking messages. This hour is for reflection, planning, and grounding yourself before the world starts making demands. Use it for meditation, journaling, exercise, or skill practice. But use it for yourself, by yourself. This sets the tone for everything that follows. Second, strategic disconnection. Schedule blocks of time every day where you are completely unreachable. No notifications, no availability. Just you and whatever important work you are building. Start with 1 hour. Build to several. This isn't antisocial. This is how serious people get serious things done. The world survived without you being available 24/7 before smartphones. It will survive again. Third, deliberate stillness. Spend at least 20 minutes every day doing absolutely nothing. Not meditating with an app, not listening to a podcast, not watching content, nothing. Just sitting with yourself and whatever thoughts arise. This is the practice that builds the mental strength to be alone without distraction. It is uncomfortable at first. That discomfort is the point. Fourth, evening review. Before bed, spend 10 minutes reviewing your day in solitude. What did you do well? Where did you let yourself down? What will you do differently tomorrow? This practice of honest self-assessment in private builds the self-knowledge that is the foundation of all real power. No external validation, no one else's opinion, just you. Evaluating yourself. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world during his time, wrote nightly reflections to himself. He didn't need an audience. He didn't need approval. He held himself accountable in the silence of his own mind. This is the practice that built an emperor who is still studied 2,000 years later. Fifth, weekly solitude rituals. Once a week, schedule an extended period of complete solitude, 3 hours minimum. Go somewhere alone. A coffee shop, a park, a long walk. Use this time for deeper reflection, bigger picture planning, or simply being comfortable in your own company for an extended period. This weekly practice builds the tolerance for aloneness that will eventually become preference. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I practice power daily. Number 8. The transformation that awaits. Let me paint you a picture of who you become when you fully transformed loneliness into power. Because this isn't just about surviving being alone, it is about thriving because of it. First, you develop an unshakable presence. When you are comfortable being alone, you stop performing for others. You stop seeking approval through your behavior. You just are. And this authenticity creates a presence that people can feel. You walk into rooms and people notice. Not because you are trying to be noticed, but because you are fully present instead of mentally calculating how others perceive you. Second, your decision-making becomes crystal clear. Without the constant noise of other people's opinions, you can finally hear your own intuition. You know what you want because you've spent time alone figuring it out. Your choices become faster and more aligned with your true self because you've eliminated the static of trying to please everyone. Third, your boundaries become impenetrable. When you can be happy alone, no one can threaten you with abandonment. When you don't need anyone's approval, no one can manipulate you with it. You set boundaries not to punish others, but to protect what you've built. And you enforce them without guilt, because you know your peace is more valuable than any relationship that requires you to sacrifice it. Fourth, your productivity compounds. All those hours you used to spend in meaningless social situations, numbing yourself with entertainment, or seeking validation online. Now they're invested in building something that matters, skills that compound, projects that grow, a body of work that speaks louder than any social network ever could. Fifth, your relationships become profound. Paradoxically, the less you need relationships, the better they become. You are no longer clinging to anyone out of fear. You are choosing people who genuinely enhance your life. And those people can feel the difference. They know your presence is a gift, not a dependency. This creates deeper, more meaningful connections than desperation ever could. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." When you've done the work of solitude, you become someone real in a world of performers. Someone who has actually met themselves while everyone else is still running from who they are. This is the transformation that awaits you. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I am becoming unstoppable. If you've made it this far, you are already different from most people. Most people closed this video the moment they felt uncomfortable. Most people are so afraid of examining their fear of loneliness that they run from anyone who suggests it might be a weakness. But you are still here, which means you are ready. Ready to stop running from silence and start using it. Ready to stop seeking validation from crowds and start building value in solitude. Ready to transform from someone who fears being alone into someone who draws power from it. The loneliness you've been running from your whole life isn't your enemy. It has been waiting to become your greatest ally. It just needed you to stop running long enough to see it. Remember, every powerful person you've ever admired spent significant time alone. Newton, Machiavelli, Marcus Aurelius, Nietzsche. They didn't fear solitude, they harvested it. They knew that the crowd is where you lose yourself, and silence is where you find yourself. Now you know too. The question is, what are you going to do with it? If this video showed you that your loneliness can become your greatest weapon, smash that like button. If you know someone who has been struggling with isolation and needs to see it differently, share this with them. And if you want more content that transforms your weaknesses into unstoppable strengths, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. The path from lonely to powerful isn't easy, but you've already started walking it by watching this video. Now take the next step tonight. Instead of reaching for your phone to escape the silence, sit with it tomorrow. Instead of filling your schedule with obligations to avoid being alone, protect some time for yourself. Day by day, transform your loneliness into the superpower it was always meant to be. Now drop this final affirmation in the comments. Loneliness is my power. Remember, in a world full of people desperately trying to escape themselves, the person who can sit alone in silence and smile holds all the power. Be that person, transform your loneliness. And watch how everything in your life changes when you finally stop running and start ruling.